or make it quite difficult. So we're going to record something. So we're going to arm the track. This is the channel off, on, mute kind of thing that we're talking about, muting solo. This is pan left and right, which puts the sound that's coming into left, right. We'll talk about all those things later. But let's just get something recorded here. We know that our metronome is on right here. It's set to, what, 95 beats per minute. And the metronome is also being instructed to send this click out. And the beauty of digital recording is, if I'm recording vocals, I can't have that going in through my mic. But since I'm recording direct audio, as long as there's no noise hitting that cable, this can be as loud as it wants and it's not going to record it. So that's another advantage of digital monitoring. So turn the volume of that down. And in a studio, you press record, you got to play because it's studio time you're wasting. At home, you can press record, go get a coffee, come back and start playing when you're inspired, and just delete all the empty space until you feel inspired. Just make sure you have a hard drive that can handle that big wave file. Okay, so I'm just going to launch the clip. So it's recording in live time. There's the metronome. We're just going to play that same ref, A minor G, A minor G, F.
Hey, you want me on the bass?
In a second. And then the composition process. You're not going to sit here and get it right for the first time. I'm not going to play it perfectly, but I'll get a mood, and then once I find like what I want to play, we'll settle in. Version of that. Okay. This is the creative process. Okay, much better gain. We'll see if we can find a section of that we like. We trim it and we see that it's, hey, okay, so we played it with the metronome. It's 8 bars long. We trim it to that 8 bars and look, it fits nicely. So now we play that. Okay, so when I press play, it starts a little bit later. Does anyone know why I didn't start right when I pressed play? I recorded it as closely as I could. You hear that? Da-da! The beat played on beat 1, but the piano came in just a little later. You want the piano right on that 1. And that's because there's always a little bit of latency. And latency is the delay for the computer to analyze that information, record it, and be like, okay, here's the stuff you played, right? And that time that it takes the computer to take is really minimal on a professional mixing board, but for interbases, you always have that little bit, there's workarounds for that. Okay, so we recorded the mix, it shows up here, it's 8 bars long. I can zoom into this mix here, and here's what's the difference between like making loops and having songs that actually sound like real hip-hop songs that are clean and well produced. It's this computer editing that we do in between. So I'm looking here and I see that my piano, it has a little bit of latency here. So I can do this a number of ways. I can time stretch it, meaning I can go in here, double click this point and stretch it to this side, and then stretch the other one, and then I could go into this waveform and bring it back to beat 3. I can go into here and adjust it. I'll show you what I mean if I wanted to make it more perfect. This is what I mean by going back in time. So I could go here, double click this to set a warp marker, loop it to here, and you can see that I'm trimming off just a little bit of that audio. Maybe that'll make a difference, maybe it won't. Maybe acoustic piano is so subtle and sensitive that you might actually want to keep that little beginning transient, because that's what makes a piano sound like a piano, is that hammer, right? So these are all choices that your musical taste will guide. So we can do that. We can stretch it here. So we stretch the beginning to fit. Let's play it back, see what it sounds like. So it sounds right on beat now. And we're listening to the rest of the performance. That second note may be a little off. Decent, right? It's okay, it's passable. So I know that this beat here, that second one was, maybe I want to adjust it. Right around here. That's not bad, we'll just leave it. Okay, so now I didn't have to do much editing. I can turn the metronome off. Okay, so we've accomplished a couple things. Let's go back to the PowerPoint and find out where we are now in our signal chain. This will help determine wherever you are in your production learning, you got to find out where you need to learn more, and here's how we're going to go through that. Okay, so is it that we need to add noise gating and make that better? We're not recording rock band, like the signal chain sounds nice, sounded clean. We don't really have to do much. Equalizing, compressing, and effects. That's what we're going to do next to this piece of sound. We could do it such that I start messing around with the piano right now, or we could wait to lay down more bass and drums and whatever. I think it might be better to lay down more tracks before we start messing. Right? This is your own personal workflow. Order is important, but not everything. So basically, what do we do with this sound now that we have it? So we can do a couple of things that maybe I would do regardless if I was EDM or rock or whatever, is I would go into here, I'd make sure that in Ableton, when you record samples, it likes to lock it to the grid using these markers. And that's one of the nice things about Ableton. It has a groove recording and mapping algorithm. If you go into this part right here, it says beats. And what that means is, I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, it says beats right over there. And that's telling the computer that, yeah, I'm treating the sound, the piano sample that we just played, I'm treating it like a beat. So the computer's gonna go in and it's gonna find those high peaks, and it's gonna kind of move them over to make it sound like it's a beated or a drummed instrument. What I like to do is go for instruments that I record live. I'll go to Complex or Complex Pro. And what that means, that setting is basically telling the computer, hey, this is not like a mechanical thing. It's an expressive, beautiful instrument. Don't mess with it too much. Leave it as clean as possible. If I take warp off, if I sang a song that was not in key with that, with the tempo and it wasn't going to the beat, that if I turned warp off, it would just play that audio at whatever speed I recorded it in. The song's going this fast, but the vocals are recorded slowly, and it's just gonna keep it that way. When you turn warp on, it's taking whatever sample is and trying to fit it to the grid. Since I played the piano on the grid, when I press warp, it really doesn't change it all that much. But I do wanna go in and press maybe Complex Pro. If I press texture, let's see what it sounds like. Or beats. And sometimes it's subtle, right? Maybe the computer's right now is just trying to use the quarter notes. It might sound robotic. Versus if I turn it on complex, I don't know, is there much of a difference?
Maybe what I would suggest is just for the purpose of example, maybe slow down the tempo and show them what the beats sound like when.
Sure,
yeah.
That's a good idea. Okay, so let's, since we recorded it to the grid, and I'm not satisfied with the tempo, this is a beautiful thing Emilio mentioned, that now we can go back and, if we want to listen to it closer, we can slow down the tempo. So we'll go and we'll press 90. Now it has a different feel, right? It doesn't even feel like a hip hop song anymore. It's like, it could be an ambient, whatever, right? If I wanted to, if I liked house music, put it to one. Endless possibility. So let's bring it down to, let's say, 80. Really slow it down. It's going to sound warped and ridiculous, but we can go into here and see what's happening. Right? You can see that they're not exactly lined on, but musically, can't really tell unless you're really slowed down. Like, there's a good point you brought up. When it's slow, I can tell that it's off. But when you're playing it at speeds that emulate the speed at which you played it at, when you bring it back to 95. If there's no metronome there, you can still, right, it might be off by a millisecond or two, but can you guys really tell? Okay, so we're done with that. Okay, so we're done, and it's the easiest way of getting your idea. And if you're a solo piano player, and you don't want to record EDM music, and you just don't want to do anything, you just want to record piano songs, beautiful piano song, do this. Just record your songs, have them written out, play them, record them, EQ them nice, send them to a mastering department, and you have a really beautiful sounding piano album. You didn't need a recording studio, right? So okay, so let's move on from here. Let's add some more. What we're going to do is add some more layers, add some drums, guitar, etc. And then we're going to go to EQ, compressing, and affecting it, making it sound good, getting the right mix. From there, we're going to go on to how do you use this information in a DJ set versus producing a song versus remixing. And it's going to be really exciting because with this, you can really do anything. Okay, so, all right. So how do we we want to add? Let's go to making a beat. So this MIDI channel. Remember we were talking about audio channels, MIDI channels. So what can you use in a MIDI channel? Well, there's a bunch of plugins and instruments that Ableton has that allow you to make drums, sample drums, record them, and sequence them very, very easily. So we added a MIDI channel by Command-Shift-T, and in that MIDI channel, we're gonna drop an Ableton instrument that comes with the software, and it comes with almost any digital audio workstation software that you'll have some sort of instruments where you can drop samples into. So we're gonna go into instruments, we're gonna grab the drum rack. Okay, we're gonna take this drum rack and we're just gonna drop it into the MIDI channel. And let's see what it looks like. Okay, it looks like a bunch of squares with whatever. These are squares that I can drop samples into. What kind of samples, you might ask? Well, I could drop individual vengeance samples like we're gonna do now to make a beat. Or if I had tambourines recorded, I could drop that in there. I could record this piano sample. This is the beautiful thing about Ableton because everything is routable. So I'll bring this channel over here. This piano clip, which is audio, because we recorded audio information, exists on my computer as an audio file. I can even drop that into a channel. And the sample appears here, and I can launch it. I can launch it in one time, right? So the entire piano sample can be put into a drum instrument, and if it's in tune, you can perform by launching full bars out of one instrument, okay? But this is not really helpful for us right now, but it's easy to see, okay? And so we'll go into this drum rack, we'll find that vengeance sample library, we'll go to the kick drums, and we'll go into, and as you can see here, see these C1, C2, see all these numbers? That just corresponds to what? The computer keyboard or the piano keyboard. The middle is the middle octave, up is higher up, and lower is lower down. So we're gonna go about to the middle, let's say C1 here, and I'm gonna take, so now I can scroll through these kicks. And then this part is where people spend a lot of time, maybe time they don't necessarily have to spend. So we're gonna be quick. So we want, let's start with hip hop, we'll change it later. So I'm just listening to them. They sound like this is house music, so you can imagine these kick drums being used in like EDM. But, you know, the rules are meant to be broken. So I want to find what's like slightly like kick drum, like a hip hop kick drum, like soft. That soft kick drum's kind of nice. So and notice how there's a tone there. It's because all frequency information relates to a note of some kind, whether it's an audible note like on the piano or not. So these drums are all tuned to the same note, which you can change later. Find one. It's a nice soft one. Yeah, that's nice. So we'll grab this one. I'll just drag it into C1. Okay, why is it important to have a MIDI keyboard? Because if I wanted to launch that drum from a keyboard instead of by pressing it, I could press the C1 note on here, and if this was hooked up via MIDI, I could launch that kick drum by pressing the note. I'm not sure if this, we ended up setting this up or not, but it's okay, we don't need this for now. Okay, so we have a kick drum. What else do we need? Any ideas? Claps, snares, all great ideas. And the order doesn't matter. And these sound very like housey, like very splashy, like crisp drums. So I'm gonna try and find one that's a little gentler.
I like the one on,
There's a lot of them.
there it is.
So what I can do is I can use my computer keyboard to play that sample that I just dropped. I pressed Z until my keyboard was registering here. You can see here, look, if I press X, I'm launching that note up there. If I press X again, I'm gonna go up one octave. X again, I'm playing that octave. X again, I'm playing that octave. So I'm gonna keep pressing Z until I'm launching A. I'm pressing A until it's launching C1. So you just keep tracking it down. And every instrument I put beside it, I can just move up the keyboard. So we have that's kind of nice. It's kind of hip-hoppy. It's kind of thin, but we'll do some more. That's kind of nice. Okay, another thing about snares is sometimes why snare drums sound so great in great records is that it's not just one snare, it's like 5. They've layered several snares, and sometimes you get the magic mix, and sometimes you don't. Okay, so we have 2 snares, and it doesn't sound great right now, but that's not the point. The point is to get the ideas on the table. And we'll find one that's more clappy, because I don't... Just there. Okay, so now we can go into these individual samples, and if we don't quite like how they sound, or they're too bright, or they're too heavy, we can change them. So we're gonna go into this kick drum. It's really boomy. It has a lot of sub-frequency information. So we can go into here and turn filters on. There's a filter here, so there's a low pass filter, which will keep all the low and frequency information, take out all the high. So it takes all that bite, right? And we're gonna talk about having a vocabulary for sound. It lost a lot of its bite because bite exists in the higher frequencies. So we've taken all that sharp information, we've taken it out, so it lost its bite, it's more muddy. Versus if we open up that filter, and just the bottom there is the frequency range. We're at 4,000 hertz right now, so 4 kilohertz. I don't want too much of that crisp top end, so I'm just gonna, yeah, maybe just a hint of it. And if I want it to come out a little more, that's it, okay? And then we can go into the volume. We can open it, when you press this button here, it opens up all the instruments I've loaded, open up here, so all of them are grouped. You hear the kick drum. I'm just launching it from my keyboard. That's fine for now. We don't really need much else. And we can go in here and we can change the individual volumes of the tracks. So let's just say we start our kick drum, which is going to be our loudest. Hopefully part of our mix, we'll keep that at minus 12 dB. One thing I recommend, watch a YouTube tutorial on the nature of sound and what does decibels mean. It's an entire different conversation. But the fact that when sound source is farther away from you, it actually gets quieter the farther it goes away is a property of the physics of sound. So knowing what 12 dB means versus what 6 dB means is important. Maybe not important right now, but when you get to producing and mixing and making sure everything's like, you're gonna wanna know how sound works in terms of the physical space. The difference between 10 and 5 dB looks like it's a 5 difference, but the difference between 10 and 5 is actually not the same between 10 and 15, right? The difference between 10 and 15 decibels is actually getting a lot quieter, and the difference between 10 and 5 is actually getting a lot louder than the rate of going from 15 to 20. So it's a logarithmic relationship, and you'll understand that over time. So I'm sampling them. I'm just getting some levels right. Like I'm always looking at my master too on this side. Sit down. I'm looking at my master so that when I'm playing all these tracks, that has a lot of thud. I'll go into this one, go into the frequency, have a high pass. I don't want all that knock at the bottom. That's fine, okay? Okay, cool. You can go into each one of these and EQ them. You can give them effects, and if you're familiar with Ableton, this is not new to you. But let's get to the meat of this. Let's drop a MIDI clip here. I can record them and play them with a computer keyboard, MIDI keyboard, doesn't matter. But you can just drop them in by hand. So in hip hop music, the kicks are on the 1, the snares are on the 2 and the 4. Right? And at its very simplest, so what I'm doing is I'm listening to these 2 snares. Oops. I'm listening to these. They have 2 different sets of information. This drum is spicier, it's a lot higher. And this one has a little bit more knock and low end. You just want to make sure that those are playing nicely together. So you can press them at the same time. And it sounds a lot better than without it. So let's delete these. Versus, there's just a little bit extra body there that you might hear at the end of the record. Then, the samples are starting at different times. At the same time, because we've launched them that way. If you look at the sample itself, look at this snare drum right here. If you zoom in, the snare doesn't start till right about there. And if you look at the other one, it has a different character altogether. So what sometimes it's important to do is to go into this MIDI clip and separate them just a little bit, because it's going to trick the ear into thinking that that snare sounds bigger than it is. So you go into this snare and you listen, and you're going to mute the kick drum because it's going to distract us. Look what happens when I take the lower sounding snare and move it earlier in time. Right? It's got that flammed kind of brat, right? And if I move it later in time, okay, so you can say it doesn't sound right on this side, doesn't sound right on that side. There's a magic space there. You're going to slide them around, and then what's going to happen acoustically is it's going to snap. The frequency are going to be additive instead of subtractive. They're not going to phase each other out, and you're going to get a snare that pops. So it's just a matter of repeating, maybe turning up the volume just a little bit, hearing it better. Okay. And what I like to do is I like to drag until it coalesces. And DJs will know what I mean when beats start sounding exactly the same. They actually sound worse, because there's phasing and they're canceling each other out. When two beats are playing at the same time but slightly apart, it actually sounds better because it sounds louder. Your brain is hearing more things, and it's tricking you into thinking it's louder. And I can turn the grid off so that I can move it not locked to the grid. Yeah, see how it just started, there was a little space there where it started to sound like it worked together. Great, so now, versus if it was locked on, it's gonna sound a little bit different, and you'll get to know that over time. Okay, so that's just this is the science of mapping MIDI clips and making drum, like you can put snares and hi-hats or whatever. Another thing I wanna talk about is groove. Why does J Dilla hip hop sound like J Dilla hip hop? For example, if I were to pull up my software here and go to some of my favorite hip hop by J Dilla, if I go to the Dilla tools here, and I play this track right here, if it will load. Okay, so listen for the kick and the snare, and trying to identify what the part of the beat's giving us the personality. Is it the fact that it's just being bad, or is it the fact that the hi-hats are a little lazier, or the snare isn't exactly on the 2 and 4, but a couple of milliseconds left or right? And that, my friend, is called groove, okay? J Dilla sounds like wicked hip-hop, and personally, I think so, because listen to the snare. Listen to the snare processing and where it is in time. It's a little late. Right? It's not on the 2 and the 4, right? And that groove is what separates the greats from just amateur producers, right? How do we accomplish groove in our pieces? So let's go back to Ableton, and we know that to make the sound a little lazier and more street, you can just take both of these snares, zoom out until you see all of them, turn the grid off, and drag them until the groove fits. There is no set number on where it is, so let's see where it is. Okay. So we'll place the kick, and we'll let the piano play. Mixing as you go. Make sure your levels, when you can adjust levels and make them better right then and there. It's like that gain staging. Okay, so it sounds very robotic and mechanical. Still doesn't sound pretty enough, right? But if I want to add that swing, and now what I did was I placed the snare to match the piano. I played in the piano. I played da 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 da, and I'm trying to land the snares right after some of those piano phrases, as if I was playing with the drummer. And that's what we'd be doing. You'd be playing with the drummer. You'd be playing with their flow. So listen to how the snare is in relation to the notes that the piano is introducing into the piece. Okay, so maybe we can't tell with the snare all that much, so let's add some hi-hats, okay? If we don't have a hi-hat folder, there's a beautiful thing you can do, and it's just a matter of knowing sound. You can take a snare and make it sound like a hi-hat. We'll just find a snare that has a lot of upper high spice to it. Right? You guys notice that, right? Right there. It had a lot of that spice. So you can go into here, You can, instead of the sample starting here, you can make the sample start here. All noise, no click. It also sounds like radio noise, but I want it to come in with some artistic expression and not just sound like this. It's almost there, right? It's almost there. So you increase the attack. What are these 4 buttons? This is another thing in production that's really important. Attack, decay, sustain, release. Any sound has these properties. How long does a sound take to come in from 0 volume to its max? The decay is how long it takes to go from its max to its hold position. The sustain is how long it holds the note, and the release is how long it takes to release the note. So if you increase the attack, you can make this snare slide in instead of starting like a block. It comes in at an angle, and that's attack. It's almost there. We can put a high pass on there and make it a little crisper. Almost like a hi-hat. And then we bring in the end to make it a little shorter. Okay, cool. Where do the hi-hats go in hip hop? Anybody know? Where am I putting these hi-hats? I'm just gonna put them anywhere. Where am I put them?
16th.
6. Explain.
16th.
16ths, awesome. So we can do 8s, we can do 16ths. Let's put them as 8s here. Oops, we're not putting the wrong one. It's this one. Okay, cool, passable. So clearly it's too loud. Mix as you go. A little more attack maybe. And I want it to be lazier, so maybe I'm going to groove all the hats over, so that the kick and the hi-hats are playing off of each other and not on top of each other. So turn the grid off, grab all the hi-hats here, shift them over until it sounds right. Right? So immediately, like from robotic to this, it sounds like you just made this sound like a loop maker, right? But all it takes for hip hop to sound like robotic to really good is this. It sounds like the hat was meant to be there. And if you take away the kick, look how the hat and the kick are playing together. Maybe they're too close together, so. If you want to make it lazy, move it over even more. It's got that J Dilla kind of shuffle. I kind of like it here. Sounds good to me, and that's it. Okay, so another thing you can do, instead of moving them manually, Ableton has this great thing called Groove. So you can go into here. Let's lock those hi-hats back to the grid again, the way you had it before. And go into the Groove Selector pool and go into Swing. Is anybody unfamiliar with what swing is? Good. So as an overview, swing is the amount that the notes stray from robotic time. So mathematical time to expressed time, because the drummer will never play like a metronome because he's human. So these numbers basically emphasize where they are in the mix. So this snare, if I drag this MIDI clip and I drag 16 with a 55% aggression in the swing, it's going to lock all of these to a groove automatically. If I make it stronger, 75%, actually, let's put them into 16th notes so you can hear it better. Right, there we go. So I put him on 8th notes. Sorry about that. We're going to put them on 16th notes for the sake of this demonstration. So they're here. Right? Let's go back to 16 with a moderate aggression. Let's go back to that. Everything's locked to the grid. We haven't really changed much. We drop this groove in, and it sounds like this. Okay, versus something like 85%. More aggressive. Okay, Okay, so that's what groove is. Ableton has beautiful groove presets for like Latin music, for all sorts of stuff. I'm not going to do it for this one because I just want to be in control of what the groove is. So I'm going to take that groove out by not having any on here. I'm going to go change these back to 8th notes by going like this. And go back to the groove that I liked or I preferred. Okay, I don't know, Larry, you want to throw some guitar on there?